This episode of the Breakthrough Success Podcast is brought to you by Jobber. Jobber is your business's command center. The easy-to-use app powers your sales, operations, and customer service all in one place. Go check them out at getjobber.com/breakthrough to receive 20% off your first 6 months. Part of achieving success is looking at the past, connecting the dots backwards, and then coming back to the present with the new lessons and insights. So in this episode, we're going to talk about how do we go back and connect those dots and lead one step at a time into the present based on what we've learned in the past. Our guest who joins us is an international leadership, team engagement, and culture speaker who's the author of 4 books, including his most recent, Just One Step. He's also the co-host of the Impact Leadership Podcast and co-founder of Cardivera, a leadership development ecosystem that helps you grow your team, grow your business, and grow your life. Our guest who joins us is none other than Jeff Nischwitz. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mark. I'm excited to be here.
Jeff, it is a pleasure to have you on Breakthrough Success. And I feel like so many people, they think about what do I have to learn? What are the skills that I need to get to the next level? And I feel like people forget about some of the stuff they've done in the past that can help them get into the better success in the present. So I'm wondering, how can we use our past as ways to learn from mistakes and learn how we can take that next step forward?
Well, most people, you're right, Mark. Most people actually realize they need to learn something from the past. The problem is they don't actually learn anything, because what happens is they go back and look at the past and they look at past failures or things that didn't work out, whether it's a business, a sales initiative, a relationship, a friendship. And what they conclude is they'll say, I want to do a better job in the future of either picking better situations. So I'm going to pick a different relationship, pick a better company, pick a better leader, or I'm going to take a look at how can I act differently in the future? Say, I don't want to act that way. I want to act differently. But the real learning and the real growth and what I really believe is transformation is when someone looks at the past, starts to understand the patterns of their behavior and figure out what drives the patterns, because we are driven by patterns of behavior, mostly in our unconscious. And those are the things that we are tripping over, being knocked over by. You know, I like to say if you're going to have a choice to run a race, would you rather run a 100-yard dash or a 100-yard hurdle? And most people, unless they really like excitement, are going to say a dash, and you know who's going to win the race. But most of us are running life as a hurdle, but we didn't even know they're there. And we keep saying, oh my God, who put that there? Well, I did, and you did. We create our own obstacles, and they're from the past.
And it's interesting how we do create these obstacles for ourselves. And it is a little bit of self-sabotage when you know that there's this thing you're supposed to do, but you don't do it. There's this common phrase, do as I say, but not as I do. And I think that really captures we just put up hurdles in front of each other. I feel like one of the problems when it comes to looking at the past for most people is that like a lot of people, when they do it, they look at their flaws. They're critical of themselves. It's easy to look at the past. For instance, if you're a podcaster, you look back at your episode 1 and you're like, what was I doing? So how can we look at the past, learn from it, but not be self-critical of ourselves and in a toxic degree?
Well, I think that's a great word. The last word was one of the best ones, was toxic, because we, in our culture, especially in this country, and there are cultural differences I'm most familiar with here in the U.S., we are excellent at shoulding on ourselves, and we should on everyone else. And it's pretty funny when I get on a stage and start speaking about this, because people, I can tell, are wondering, what did he just say? Because I'll say, we need to stop shoulding on ourselves, and we need to stop shoulding on everyone else. And what I'm actually saying, I'll slow it down, is shoulding. And if you notice the sound in shoulding is really a version of shaming. We do it to someone else. We say, you know what you should do? Because what we're saying is whatever you're doing is not enough or not right. What you're doing is not a good choice. You should do differently. And then I say it to myself. I look in the past and say, oh, I shouldn't have done that, or, you know what, I should do this. I should get a different job. I should end this relationship. I should learn to listen better. I should go to school. I've eliminated the word should from my vocabulary. I don't use it with others. I don't use it with myself because, as you said, it's a matter of self-sabotage. And here's where we really are mean to ourselves. So we self-sabotage, and then we go back and beat ourselves up for self-sabotaging without really addressing, so why did I self-sabotage? What drove that? And it's all a lie. It's all a story we've made up from our events in our life about beliefs we have about ourselves. And it's all a story that we can unwrap and reframe the story going forward. But the big piece here, Mark, is one of the reasons we don't is number one, we're trained to beat ourselves up. That's what we do culturally. Most feedback is negative and critical. We're easy to find what we did wrong, including others. The other part is really taking a look at what created the patterns and the behaviors can actually be painful. And we don't want to feel the pain. So we numb ourselves, and that's a whole nother topic, how we live in a numbing society.
And Jeff brings up such a great point. We often put ourselves down. We are often self-critical. That's why I wanted to enter that in the conversation, because a lot of people, they'll look at what they haven't done instead of the things they have done. And the fact that people should all the time, and they use that terminology like, oh, I should have made this investing decision, or, oh, I should have gone into this industry earlier. But you are where you are now, and that's part of how you take power. I know, Jeff, you mentioned earlier something really important, the behavior patterns. And that's where, when you look in the past, we go from, I should have done this, I can't change it, this is bad and too bad for me. But when you look at patterns, you can really start to make change. So for people who are looking at the past for that, connecting the dot backwards to have that better present, how do we start putting this stuff into action?
Well, I'm going to tell you up front, Mark, it's challenging. And what I've learned for myself is that most of the people who have helped me, most of these patterns I've spotted in myself, I had an outsider who helped me spot them. Because the problem is when we're immersed in them, it's like, have you ever heard the phrase bark face?
I've not.
Okay, so bark face, you've heard the thing where you can't see the forest for the trees?
Yes.
Well, bark face is you're so far and hard pressed against the tree that you literally have bark face because all you can see, feel, and experience is the bark. Mm-hmm. And the same thing happens in our lives. If we're living our lives, we also ask ourselves horrible questions, because we'll ask questions like, why did I do that? And we'll say, well, I'm not sure why I did that. And then we'll come up with a great story that makes us feel good. And we don't actually get to the truth because we're afraid of the truth is the bottom line, because we're afraid the truth is going to reveal itself that maybe we are inadequate. Because we're in a funny world. I don't know if you experience this, Mark. When you give someone a compliment, how often they throw it back at you.
Yeah, we don't know how to.
Yeah, they'll say, no, it was nothing. It was nothing. And I'll say, you literally smacked them in the face. And you took that compliment and threw it, because we have a hard time accepting compliments because we are so hard on ourselves. And we want to quickly tell you, yeah, but if you knew what I did yesterday, you wouldn't think good of me today. Well, I don't really care what you did yesterday. And a lot of times, to your point of learning, that's why I wrote the whole chapter in the new book on the key to presence, because I think presence is the secret sauce. And we think we're learning, but all we're doing is we're regrinding the past. And we're spinning our head about, oh, I should have done that, I should have done that. There's no learning when we should ourselves. There isn't any. It's just me beating myself up.
And part of being able to go back to the past, and it's not just about seeing mistakes, it's about seeing opportunities for improvement. And then you take what you learn and you carry it into the future. And on this thought of patterns, again, you do have a lot of bad habit examples where maybe someone's watching TV more than they should and they're not happy about that. Then they see this and they want to make the change. So maybe they shift to podcast episodes. Maybe that's how you stumbled across us on Breakthrough Success. And for that, thank you for however you stumbled across us. But the problem that some people have is they'll be super motivated when they make the change, and then 2 weeks or 3 weeks go by, and then it's back to old habits. So we can figure out what to do. We can take action, but then how do we make it last?
Well, there's two things in there, at least two, Mark. One is, in order to create, we talk about wanting to break habits, but what we really do is we create a new habit. And it takes a while. It takes a while to build up that muscle. It's like working out. So one is we don't have enough patience. The other is we don't plan for the inevitable obstacles to change. Because there's a reason that we all behaved a certain way over the years. Whatever your habits are, mine, and some are obvious, like you said. Someone says, I don't want to watch so much TV, but they do it anyway. I'm talking about even more micro habits of how they communicate with people, how they listen, how they react. We've heard the phrase, someone's a people pleaser. Do they realize how their people pleaser is showing up in their personal and professional relationships? And so the problem is, if we don't go take a look at what's driving the behavior, we often can't change it, because Nike's got a great brand, but when it comes to this kind of work, it doesn't work most of the time. Just do it does not work for most people. It doesn't have stickiness. We can do it for a little while, but the drivers of the behaviors didn't change. I'm trying to change the behaviors without understanding what's in the way of that change.
And Jeff brings up this really great insight. I think too many people, they want to make the change, which is great, but then they don't really try to change themselves. And you can't achieve the higher results unless you rise up to match the type of person who would be able to achieve those results. And I think so many people, they skip the changing themselves part. And that's the big reason a lot of people aren't hitting their goals.
Well, let's talk about one of the core reasons that's in the way of us changing. So most of the behavior we engage in, especially the part that we would say doesn't really serve us, but it actually does. Like someone says, I want to stop doing that. It doesn't serve me. But here's the reality. It does serve you. That's why you do it. We're really smart in human beings. We only do things that serve us. We don't know why. And one of the main servers for us is we do things to protect ourselves. So when we're engaged in self-protection, and you say, well, imagine, Marcus, whatever it is, you're engaged in a behavior that's designed to protect you. Now you're going to change your behavior, but you don't realize you're about to change behavior from self-protection, which means now you're at risk, which means now you're vulnerable. Well, no wonder you're going to sabotage yourself, because part of you still wants to be safe. But if you don't realize that's in the way, you'll never change the behavior, because you're going to get tripped up by your own internal desire, in that case, to stay safe.
We have more great content coming up in this episode, but first we have a message from today's sponsor, Jobber. Jobber's award-winning software helps small home service businesses organize their entire operations, from scheduling jobs and managing their crews to invoicing customers and collecting payments. That way, you can spend more time on the services you're already great at. Job by job, business by business, Jobber is transforming the ways their customers deliver service. Start your free trial over at getjobber.com/breakthrough. All right, let's get right back into the episode. And I'm just going to repeat something that I wrote down. We only do things that serve us. That was what Jeff said. And that is so powerful, because if you think about the things you're not doing, I mean, long-term, do they serve you? Yes. But in the moment, it's easier to procrastinate than it is to do a big project like produce a podcast or a book or something of that nature. So using that insight in mind, think about what you're doing right now, what you're not doing that you want to be doing, and then change some definitions around of what's serving you and what's not serving you. Change whys, change motivations, but get clear on how something is serving you if that is something you know you should be doing.
And Mark, that piece you just talked about, and people being willing to acknowledge that, and the hesitancy to acknowledge it is one of the biggest challenges people have to change. Because when I tell people that, most of the time, 90% of the people, their first reaction is, that's not true. I want to stop it. I said, but actually you don't. Because think about it. It's kind of logical and illogical at the same time. Why would I do things that don't serve me? But the truth is we do. But then if you can really understand how it serves you, then you can start to, what I say, let go of that part. So for example, it's going on with people right now. You alluded to it. There are people during this coronavirus pandemic who are choosing, I'll say everything's a choice, sometimes it's unconscious, to watch Netflix all day. And they'll say, I don't really want to do that. And they'll say, that's not serving me. Oh, but I guarantee you it is, because it's either giving you comfort, or it's keeping you from thinking about something that scares you, or it's keeping you from that project that terrifies you, like you said. People have so many ideas, and the biggest reason they don't pursue them is they have some fear that it's going to fail. And then they fall into the trap, and I call it one of the biggest lies we have. They'll say, well, Jeff, if I knew what I needed to do, I would do it. I just haven't figured it out. I said, nope, you're wrong. You already know. But if you actually know, then you got to do something. But as long as you don't know what to do, you don't have to do anything. That's the serving part. It serves you to not know the answer, because then you don't have to take any risk. And you spend your life sitting around saying, when I finally know my direction, man, I'm going to be after it. Yep. Well, good luck with that.
And I'm going to use the author example again, because Jeff and I are both authors, and a lot of people, they do want to write their first book. And it's like, I want to do this. I know this serves me, but then you don't do it. And that kind of goes into what Jeff was saying, where you don't write the book, even though you know you want to, because you don't have to go through the work. You don't have to go through the, what if I don't sell the book? What if my friends hate it? And that sounds like stuff that you consciously would disagree with, but it is something your subconscious could be, yeah, that's my wheelhouse. That's exactly why I'm not proceeding with this book. It serves me in that way. And it's interesting you mentioned coronavirus and Netflix, and you've got a darker element to this where you've got a lot of drugs and drinking to numb everyone of what's going on. That's how some people do it. I mean, I've had some people on the show who they've gone through that type of stuff, and it's usually, my life is not going the way I wanted it to. I need some way to just numb it off. And the drugs and drinking don't serve you in terms of what, like accomplishing goals and even like really basic stuff like having a good life, but it does serve you in numbing, in escaping. And that's a big part of what do you want to focus on in life.
Well, the numbing is really tricky, Mark, because there's a lot of ways we numb in our culture here in the United States. There's the usual suspects. You mentioned drugs and alcohol. We numb with pornography. We numb with infidelity in our relationships. We numb, some people, they numb with food. Some people numb by spending money. So there's all sorts of numbing, but the biggest one, and I believe it is the biggest numbing mechanism in the United States that we're not talking about, and that is staying in a constant state of busyness. Busyness is a numbing. Busyness is a drug. If you go out and look at the research is very conclusive that says we feel the need to say we're busy and feel busy because it gives us a sense of value. I feel more valuable if I'm busy. So everyone you meet, what's going on? Man, I'm really busy. I talk to people who have nothing going on in their life, but oh my God, I'm busy. And if I'm busy all the time, then I don't have to think about what's not working in my life. I don't have to think about that thing I want to do because I'm too busy to do that. So busyness keeps us safe because it keeps us from things that we might want to take a risk on, and it keeps us from feeling the stuff that may not be working in our life.
Wow, that was powerful. Normally, the busy questions, it's like, what's the difference between being busy versus being productive? And, it's something to the effect of be aligned with your priorities, but this is deeper. How do we because you want to be growing your business and pursuing your goals, all that stuff. But how can we have that mix between still being busy / productive? We're just going to do it for this example versus doing so much work to the point where it's numbing and we don't address the bigger problems that we need to be addressing.
Well, I think the best way, there's a couple ways to do it, Mark. The best way is something a lot of us resist, which is to really take a look at our priorities. Some people have them, some people don't. But if you say you have them, or if you choose to sit down and figure out your priorities, then look at your day, look at your week, look at your month, and see if your calendar, see if your activities align with your priorities. Most people are going to find they don't. And that's the gap, and that's the indicator that I am using busyness to avoid addressing something that I say is important in my life. Like if you think of, I fell into this trap, Mark. This was a personal journey for me. My first business, I'm an ex-lawyer. I started my own law firm after practicing a while. And I admit I was a workaholic. I'm still a workaholic. I have to fight workaholism. I could work all the time. I have to catch myself. And what I told myself for years when I wasn't there for my family was, I'm doing what you do to start and build a business. This is what you do. This is making them a priority because I'm going to do what has to be done for them. And years later, when I look back, I realized that really wasn't true. Was there an element of truth? Sure, like there's always an element. But the deeper truth is, me being busy and working all the time was a way for me to be away from a marriage that wasn't working. And the price I paid was in my relationship with my children. They missed out on having me around more because I was being the entrepreneur. And it can be a trap. So, and I think this is the key, Mark, is to recognize that it's many times we lie to ourselves. So don't accept what we say to ourselves the first time. I heard something recently on a number, I liked it, that you have to ask yourself why questions at least 7 times to get to the truth. Like, why are you doing this? Don't trust the first 6 answers. Keep going. And if you say, why didn't you do this? Or, I love this one. Why am I afraid? Is one of my favorite self-processing questions, because most of the time the question we ask ourselves is, am I afraid? Well, we know what the answer is going to be. No, I'm not afraid, because if I'm afraid, that means I'm weak. I'm not courageous. So I assume, like if I look at, I'm working on a new business launch right now. We're behind schedule from when we said we'd launch. I know somewhere in there is some fear, because otherwise I would have, if it's really that important, it would be done. So instead of saying, oh, I've got this distraction, or this got in the way, or this didn't happen on time, I say, why am I afraid? And what am I afraid of here? Oh man, maybe if I actually launch this, now I get to find out if someone wants it. The basic fear, the biggest fear we have is rejection. And the number one enoughness story we tell ourselves is, I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. Who am I to write a book? Who's going to care what I have to say? Not because people don't have time to write a book. It's because if you've written books, Mark, if you feel the fire in your belly, that book's going to happen unless you're in the way.
Yep.
Right? Nobody else got in your way. Who else get in your way? Who can keep you from writing a book? No one. Only you can keep yourself from writing a book.
And with writing a book, it's just 1,000 words a day for 20 to 30 days, depending on how long you want your book to be. So it's not this incredibly detailed process. It's really that simple, depending on how simple you want to make it. There's a bunch of different ways to write a book we won't get into. The why, I just want to bring that up again. I really love when we talk about this, because you ask 5 whys to yourself, to others, you figure out the true answer. And I feel like there is this misconception, and Jeff really mentions this, because when you become an entrepreneur, the whole idea is that you get freedom, that you get time with family, you get all the things that a job is not able to give you. And the issue for some people is that they get way too immersed in their work, and they're doing the 12 or the 14-hour day, which works for some people. But is that the reason you became an entrepreneur? So part of that is really going back to foundational core stuff. And if it's not on the calendar, as Jeff mentioned, you got to put it on the calendar or be clear with yourself. Like, I'm kidding myself. This is not a priority for me. And I mean, there's just so many ways that you can look at your past, you can look at where you are now and take those steps to carving out your better future. Jeff, I know you have your book, Just One Step, Walking Backwards to the Present on the Camino Trail. We will have that book in the show notes. I'm wondering, where do you want us to go also to keep following your work and journey?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Mark. A couple different places. You can go to my website for my current leadership development business, which is the Nischwitz, well, it's just Nischwitz Group, which is NISCHWITZ group.com. As you mentioned at the beginning, I'm a co-host of the Impact Leadership Podcast. That website is a similar Impact Leadership Podcast. And then I'm launching a new venture, which is a leadership online membership leadership development ecosystem called Cardivera, CARDIVERA.com. And I'm on every social media platform, at least LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. Find me, connect. Let's share some stories. Let's walk through life together. You don't have to do it alone.
And just being able to have someone to walk with, that accountability person, just being able to engage with Jeff on those social platforms through his work. I think that's going to be really great if you did enjoy this conversation, because again, all these episodes, they're just a teaser of what the guests can offer when you take a deeper look at them. So Jeff, thank you so much for joining us on Breakthrough Success. It was a pleasure to have you here today.
Hey, Mark, I'm really grateful that you invited me. And as I said at the beginning, I love having conversations about these things because it's not just my work, it's my calling.
This episode of the Breakthrough Success Podcast was brought to you by Jobber. Jobber is your business's command center. The easy-to-use app powers your sales, operations, and customer service all in one place. Start a free trial or sign up today to receive 20% off your first 6 months. Find out more at getjobber.com/breakthrough.